Working level talks on economic cooperation projects between the Koreas. The two sides are holding talks at the inter-Korean border village of Panmunjom and connecting and modernizing cross-border railroads. South Korea's consumer sentiment plunges to a 14-month low in June over dour jobs data and the escalation of the U.S.-China trade spat. The sentiment this month as low as the time South Korea saw its former president impeached last year. We're into week 2 of the 2018 World Cup, and the teams through to the round of 16 are starting to take shape. The 4 teams in the knockout stages: Spain, Portugal, Uruguay, and the host nation of Russia. Our starting point this morning was some breaking news. 2 passenger aircraft, one on a Korean Airjet and the other an Asiana Airlines plane, have collided into each other at a parking ramp at Seoul's Gimpo International Airport. Officials say the collision happened at around 9:20 a.m. Korea time, some 40 minutes ago. The wing of the Asiana Airlines jet and the tail section of the Korean airplane were damaged in the incident. No injuries have been reported since there were no passengers on board either of the aircraft at the time. No word yet on what caused the crash, but we'll be sure to bring you the updates as we learn them. In other news, the two Koreas are sitting down for yet another round of discussions today. It's about connecting and modernizing existing railways between Seoul and Pyongyang. We have our Unification Ministry correspondent Oh Jung-hee on the line for us. Jung-hee, what's the latest?
Taemin, we're expecting the talks to have just started. Today's meeting was scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. Korea time a few minutes ago at the Peace House located on the South Korean side of the border village of Panmunjom. The South Korean delegation left from Seoul's office for inter-Korean dialogue at 7:30 this morning. The delegation highlighted they'll discuss some practical issues with the North Korean delegation on connecting and modernizing railways, all part of implementing April's Panmunjom Declaration.
There are a lot of things we can push forward once the international sanctions are lifted. And therefore, a lot of things have to be investigated and prepared beforehand. We'll try it and set a solid enough foundation for our prospective cooperation.
This is the first time for the two Koreas to discuss railways since 2008, and today's talks are meaningful in that the two Koreas are now expanding their discussions from denuclearization, sports, and humanitarian issues to economic cooperation as well. They have one railway connected in 2004 between the South Korean capital Seoul and North Korean city of Sinuiju, but renovation is needed to modernize it. And in addition to that railway, South and North Korea are hoping to connect their railway along the eastern coast of the peninsula, which would start off from South Korea's southeastern city of Busan, cut through North Korea and even Russia, then head towards Europe. And for that, the two Koreas will have to find a way to modernize North Korean railroads, which are very old and low speed. This will be of a great meaning as South Korea will be connected to the continent, enabling the movement of people and logistics to the continent by train. But it's actually difficult to expect some specific actions to be taken by the two Koreas to actually connect and modernize their railways because of the international sanctions currently imposed on North Korea. So if Seoul and Pyongyang see some progress today, they are expected to agree on investigating the current railroad status and joint studies on how to modernize them. Taemin.
It's a long way to go ahead. Our Oh Jung-hee live for us at the Unification Ministry. Thank you. Staying with inter-Korean relations, the two sides, after holding their first colonel-grade meeting in more than 7 years, have promised to reconnect their military communication lines quickly. Our Park Hee-jun tells us more.
South and North Korea have agreed to restore military communication lines as part of their implementation of the April 27 Panmunjom Declaration, which includes reducing military tension and building trust. The agreement came during the two Koreas' military working-level talks on Monday at the Customs Immigration and Quarantine Office in Paju, Gyeonggi-do Province, just south of the Indo-Korean border. Each delegation was made up of 5 members, the South Korean delegation led by Army Colonel Jo Yong-gun and the North Korean delegation by Colonel Om Chang-nam. The two sides have agreed to quickly restore the West Sea Channel, which was severed in 2016 after the shutdown of the Inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex. It was restored in January for the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, but at present it's only capable of phone communication. The two Koreas also plan to reconnect the East Sea communication lines. The channel was suspended in 2011 amid military tensions and later destroyed in a wildfire. They will negotiate further on the equipment needed for its reconstruction and a timetable for the process in follow-up discussions. Once the lines are restored, they will help the two Koreas avoid possible military conflicts caused by misunderstandings. These talks are the first of their kind in more than 7 years, since the deadly attack on the South Korean warship Cheonan in 2010 and the shelling of Yeonpyeong-do Island later in the same year. South and North Korea will work out the details of the restoration through the exchange of documents and future inter-Korean military talks through the exchange of official notices. Seoul's Ministry of National Defense says it will take the necessary measures by cooperating with the relevant departments to follow through with the agreement as soon as possible. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Civic representatives from the two Koreas have been discussing ways to hold joint celebratory events on historic occasions. The committee in Seoul unveiled those plans on Monday, and our Kim Mo-gyun with the details.
The South Korean Civic Committee for implementing the June 15 declaration revealed that they had agreed with their North Korean counterparts last week to hold joint events between the South and North on historic dates. Speaking to reporters on Monday, the South Korean civic group that visited North Korea for the first time under the Moon Jae-in administration said that the two sides agreed to actively comply with the Panmunjom Declaration and work towards easing military tensions on the Korean peninsula. According to the committee, the two Koreas will begin by engaging in joint discussions across various sectors and regions. The two Koreas will also hold joint events such as a joint unification soccer competition and hold joint celebrations for the October 4 Declaration Anniversary, National Foundation Day, and Independence Movement Day. The two Koreas will make a joint statement on July 4 and designate the 3-month period from then until October 4th as the Panmunjom Declaration implementation period. During that period, they'll hold various events such as displaying the unification flag and creating commemoration badges. The 15-member South Korean committee visited North Korea for 4 days from June 20th to discuss implementing the Panmunjom Declaration with a North Korean committee and an overseas committee. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
South Korea has started the long process of picking candidates for the upcoming reunion of families ripped apart by the Korean War. More than 57,000 South Koreans registered with the country's Red Cross as hopeful participants, and of them, only 100 will have the chance to see their long-lost relatives face-to-face one more time. Telling us about how the process works is our Kan Hyung-woo.
South Korea has selected candidates for the reunions in August of families separated by the Korean War. On Monday, the South Korean Red Cross chose 500 people out of the registered 57,000 separated family members by computerized random selection. Those who are older and have immediate family members north of the border had a higher chance of being picked as a candidate for the reunions. The Red Cross will check the health of each of the 500 candidates and see whether they're willing to participate in the reunions to narrow down the number of candidates to 200. The two Koreas will then confirm which family members are still alive on their respective sides of the border and exchange the final list of participants on August 4th. The reunions will take place for a week starting from August 20th at North Korea's Mount Kumgang, with 100 participants chosen by South Korea and another 100 chosen by North Korea. Considering how the previous reunions have been held, it's likely that the two Koreas will split the week into 2 parts. During the first half of the week, the 100 selected participants from South Korea would meet their family members from the north, and during the latter half, the 100 participants selected by North Korea would meet their family members from the south. People who have difficulties moving can have one other family member accompany them. In this way, at the last reunion event held in October 2015, over 970 people were able to meet their family members. There have been 20 family reunions since 2000, and about 20,000 people from some 4,200 families have been able to meet their family members. In South Korea, 57,000 people remain alive out of 132,000 people registered as separated from their family members. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
North Korea has decided not to hold its annual, quote, anti-United States rally this year. The move is being seen as a public gesture to improve its relations with Washington following the Singapore summit on June 12th. The AP reports that Pyongyang skipped the rally, which is held annually on June 25th, the day in 1950 when the Korean War broke out. It explained that more than 100,000 North Koreans gathered for last year's rally, and North Korea also decided not to release its customary anti-U.S. imperialism postage stamps, which are normally released for a month at this time of the year. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said there is no timeline for North Korea's denuclearization, but that the U.S. is committed to moving forward at an expeditious moment. Speaking to CNN in a telephone interview on Sunday, marking his first 2 months in office, Pompeo added that the Trump administration will constantly reassess whether enough progress is being made to continue the negotiations. Now, this contradicts a senior defense official who said ahead of Defense Secretary James Mattis's trip to Asia that Washington will soon set a timeline for North Korea with specific asks. Now, Pompeo himself had also told reporters the day after the first ever North Korea-U.S. summit on June 12th that Washington hopes to achieve major disarmament by North Korea within Trump's current term, which ends in January 2021. Seoul and Washington have begun their fourth round of defense cost-sharing negotiations on Tuesday morning here in Seoul. The two-day discussions are led by South Korean Foreign Ministry's representative for defense burden sharing Chang Won-sam and his U.S. counterpart Timothy Betts. The two sides have held 3 rounds of previous negotiations since March this year, but haven't yet reached a deal. According to a special measures agreement, or SMA, between the two sides, South Korea pays the expenses of South Korean workers at U.S. bases in the country, as well as costs related to facility construction and logistical support. South Korea is expected to pay some $900 million this year, roughly 50% of the total annual cost of deploying U.S. military forces in the South. And as the 9th SMA signed in 2014 is expected to expire at the end of this year, Seoul and Washington are aiming to sign 10th agreement within the year. South Korea plans to double its basic research fund by 2022. Now, the agreement was reached during a policy coordination meeting between the government and the ruling Democratic Party of Korea this morning. Now, that means that the funds will reach some $2.2 billion and will be aimed at boosting creative research and development. The two sides also agreed to step up the R&D budget to tackle environment issues such as the fine dust problem. The government also plans to revive a meeting between science and IT-related ministries as part of efforts to create a cooperative system where multiple ministries work hand in hand. Now, this is all part of President Moon Jae-in's policy goal to achieve innovative growth, by which technical innovations lead to economic growth and the creation of new jobs. Another depressing figure, South Korea's consumer sentiment is at its lowest point in 14 months over slowing job data and the tense U.S.-China trade spat. The Bank of Korea says Tuesday the composite consumer sentiment index dropped 2.4 points from the previous month to 105.5, as low as a time when the country saw its former president Park Geun-hye fall from his power last year. A reading above 100 means there are more optimism than pessimists about the economy. And earlier this month, Statistics Korea announced that the jobless rate for Koreans between 15 to 29 years of old was 10.5%, the highest on record since related figures were first compiled back in 1999. U.S. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin said on Monday that a scheduled U.S. government statement on investment restrictions and intellectual property rights will apply to all countries, not just China. Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal had both reported that Washington is planning to increase legal measures against Chinese investments in sensitive U.S. industries. But Mnuchin tweeted that this was false, fake news, adding that restrictions will apply to all countries that are trying to steal U.S. technology. Meanwhile, China will cut import tariffs on automobiles starting from July, and the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency reported on Tuesday that the average tariff on automobiles is expected to drop by nearly 14%. Shifting focus, getting to the latest on the 2018 World Cup in Russia. Groups A and B were in actions on Monday. In Group A, the host nation and Uruguay advance, and Group B, European powerhouses Portugal and Spain will continue their journey in Russia. Our Lee Seung-jae with a rundown.
Day 11 of the 2018 Russia World Cup saw kickoff time synchronized for the third and final round of group games before the knockout stage of the tournament begins. It was Group A up first on Monday. With the pressure off having already qualified, host nation Russia and Uruguay squared off at the Samara Arena. Uruguay took an early lead thanks to Luis Suarez's superb goal in the 10th minute, followed by an own goal by Russia's Denis Cheryshev in the 23rd minute. It all went downhill for the host nation as Igor Smolnikov was sent off on a second yellow in the 36th minute. The 10-man Russian side could not come back, with Edison Cavani's close-range goal in the 90th minute sealing the match. The result sees Uruguay finish top with 9 points in Group A, followed by Russia with 6 points. Over in Volgograd, Saudi Arabia and Egypt faced off in the final Group A matchup. Mohamed Salah would give the Egyptians the lead in the 22nd minute, but the lead is erased in the final minutes of the first half after Salman Al-Faraj converts a penalty for Saudi Arabia to level things at 1 apiece after the first half. It remained that way for 90-plus minutes until Salam Al-Dasari found the back of the net to give the Saudis a thrilling 2-1 victory. The win means Saudi Arabia finished third in Group A, followed by Egypt, who head home winless at the 2018 World Cup. In the evening round of the games, the focus was on Group B. Spain and Morocco got off to an exciting start as Khalid Boutaïd's left-footed strike gives the North Africans an early 1-0 lead. That lead didn't last long. Real Madrid midfielder Isco leveling the match at 1-1 just 5 minutes later. It stayed that way until the 81st minute when Youssef En-Nasseri's header gave Morocco a shocking 2-1 lead. But there's 90 minutes in football as Iago Aspas' stoppage time goal saves Spain for the 2-2 draw and sees them advance to the round of 16. Portugal, also looking to advance to the knockout stages, faced off against Iran. Iran, looking to pull an upset against the European powerhouse, kept things close until Ricardo Quaresma's goal in the 45th minute gave Portugal the 1-0 lead. It could have been 2-0 for Portugal, but Cristiano Ronaldo's spot kick in the 53rd minute saved by Iran's Ali Reza Baranvand. It stayed that way until a controversial penalty was called in stoppage time of the second half as Karim Ansari-Fard converts the penalty to make the final score 1-1. The results mean Portugal and Spain advance. Iran and Morocco head home to try again in 4 years. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Japan's Hashima Island was given World Heritage status back in 2015. And contrary to how the Japanese government promotes it, the site was a prison for Koreans forced into hard labor. And while Tokyo promised to outline all aspects of the so-called Battleship Island, their implementation report was heavily criticized, and it'll be put to an evaluation this week. Our Lee Ji-won reports.
Japan's report on its progress so far in telling the full history of Hashima Island will be scrutinized this week by the World Heritage Committee at their annual session held this year in Bahrain. Known as a State of Conservation Report, the document was submitted last year and covered efforts related to Japan's World Heritage sites of the Meiji Revolution period, including Hashima Island, also known as Battleship Island. During the Second World War, between 500 and 800 Koreans were forcibly taken to Hashima to work in coal mines for little or no pay and hardly any food. When Hashima was listed as a World Heritage Site in 2015, Japan had promised to publicize the island's true history, which would include setting up information centers and commemorating the victims. The World Heritage Committee is expected to publish its analysis of Japan's progress report on Wednesday. The review's first draft strongly urges Japan to do its best to address Hashima's full history, but many South Koreans are saying that it does not clearly deal with the loopholes in Tokyo's reports. In fact, Japan's progress report fails to include either the phrases forced labor or brought against their will, phrases Japan itself had used back in 2015. Instead, it says simply that there was a large number of people from the Korean peninsula who supported Japanese industry. The committee's first draft also does not address Japan's plans for the information center, which would be located in Tokyo, over 1,000 kilometers away from Hashima, a gesture seen as insincere. Even worse, the center is to be set up as a think tank, which could be used to portray the facts as a matter of opinion. A South Korean foreign affairs official said the government has been firm that it cannot accept Japan's 2017 report and that it has raised the issue with UNESCO, its advisory committee ICOMOS, the member states, and even with Japan. The official added that Seoul will make sure the World Heritage Committee will correctly address the issue this time so that Japan's next implementation report, due at the end of 2019, will be properly amended and evaluated in 2020. 이지원, Arirang News.
South Korea's immigration authorities have started screening the applications of hundreds of Yemeni nationals that are seeking refuge on South Korea's southern resort island of Jeju. The Ministry of Justice says it'll lift the travel ban issued on them following the first round of the screening process. Our Kim Hyo-sun reports.
South Korea's immigration authority on Monday began reviewing the applications of Yemeni refugees seeking asylum on Jeju Island. The Korea Immigration Service's Jeju branch said new staff members, including 2 Arabic interpreters, joined the team to review the personal information of nearly 500 Yemenis.
We plan to first carry out the screening process for those who have humanitarian reasons for coming, those who are unemployed, and those who urgently need to leave the island.
Following the primary screening process, the Ministry of Justice plans to lift the ban it has issued on the Yemenis, which prohibits them from traveling elsewhere in the nation. The ministry also explained that a support center for foreigners should be established in Jeju once their stay on the island is prolonged. If the number of Yemeni refugees seeking asylum on Jeju increases, it looks likely that a special facility will be built to support their stay, similar to the Foreigner Support Center which is already in Yeongjong-do, Incheon. It's left to be seen whether Korea can become a second home to the Yemenis who fled their home country due to civil war and hunger. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
HarleyDavidson says it's moving production of some of its motorcycles outside of the United States to avoid EU tariffs. For more on this and other news around the world, we turn to our Do Aram at the News Center. So Aram, the Trump administration's duties on European goods led to these retaliatory tariffs, and it seems to be backfiring on American companies.
That's right, so the EU imposed import duties of 25% on a range of American goods last week, including Harley-Davidson motorcycles. That was in response to Washington's tariffs on European steel and aluminium, which President Trump said was designed to protect US jobs. But now it seems those measures have produced unintended consequences. Harley said Monday that the increased costs from the import taxes are threatening its international sales and could cost the firm up to $100 million a year. In order to offset the impact of the retaliatory tariffs, Harley-Davidson said it would be shifting some production overseas, but didn't specify where. The shift in production is expected to take about 18 months. The Wisconsin-based company already has factories in Brazil and India and is opening one in Thailand while closing its Australian plants. The firm said that if it stayed in the US, then it would result in an incremental cost of about $2,200 per motorcycle sold in Europe. President Trump had previously thanked Harley-Davidson for staying in America while criticizing other firms for moving production outside the United States. But his trade disputes with other countries has even forced America's most iconic motorcycle manufacturer to look elsewhere. Later Monday, Trump tweeted that he was, quote, surprised by Harley's decision, describing it as waving the white flag. Europe is Harley's second biggest market outside the US and sold almost 40,000 motorcycles in Europe last year. Results from Sunday's presidential and parliamentary elections in Turkey show that Recep Tayyip Erdogan has the Turkish community in Germany to thank for his victory. Nearly two-thirds of the Turkish community in Germany cast votes for Erdogan, which is far more than the support he got domestically. German media reports that Erdogan had 65.7% of the vote in Germany, with 80% of votes counted, compared to a projected 52.6% in Turkey. Erdogan's victory has sparked much controversy, with an international election watchdog saying the elections were skewed in favour of the Turkish president and his ruling party. Critics at home, meanwhile, have criticised the country's new constitution, which gives sweeping powers to one person in an executive presidency. Search and rescue teams in Thailand are looking for 13 members of an under-16 football team who went missing in a flooded cave over the weekend. Officials believe 12 players entered the Tam Luang Nang Non cave in Chiang Rai province with their 25-year-old coach late Saturday afternoon. They are thought to have been still alive, and officials are tracking footprints and other clues to their whereabouts. However, heavy rain is causing water within the cave to rise, hampering search efforts.
And in a moment's time before we go, we are going to cut to some of the live video footages coming from the presidential office of Cheongwade, as we are expecting some sort of an announcement regarding possibly the reshuffle within the presidential office. We do not have the details yet on that just yet, but there had been some growing calls to make some changes to the top office's economic line as economic team as taking responsibility for some of the latest economic figures that had not been showing some signs of improvement. Just months ago, we had seen one of the worst jobs figure recorded in history, and also another sentiment figure that just came out from the Bank of Korea showing that people in Korea are reluctant to spend due to unexpectedness shrouding the local economy. What we're seeing on screen is the presser scene of the venue for the presser at the top office of Cheongwade here in South Korea, as we are expecting some sort of an announcement from the presidential office regarding some sort of a reshuffle within the presidential office. We do not know exactly who or which post will be up for a change at the moment, but we will be leaning towards it and cut to the scene once we hear the announcement being made. But something that we can expect from today's announcement is possibly a reshuffle within the presidential office's economic team, as the country had been seeing some eye-watering figures on almost all jobs figures and all the other economic figures that had reflected the country's status in terms of economy. We are patiently waiting for some announcement from the presidential office of Cheongwade, possibly on the reshuffling of its team and the presidential office. We do not have the details yet, but in moments' time, we are going to cut to that scene. We are seeing some sort of a movement within the presidential office's presser site.
안녕하세요. 문재인 대통령은 오늘 청와대 일부 수석과 비서관들에 대한 인사를 단행했습니다. 먼저 정책실 일자리 수석에
First of all,
정태호
Chung Tae-ho, who is currently the Planning and Policy Secretary of Presidential Security Office, has been appointed as the Presidential Secretary for Jobs. And Yoon Jong-won, who is the ambassador to OECD, has been appointed as the Presidential Secretary for Economy. And Lee Yong-sun, who is the head of the regional office of Yangcheon for the Democratic Party, has been appointed as the Presidential Office for Civil Society. And we have established the Planning and Policy Committee, and the head of the Income-led Special Committee will be appointed as Hong Chang-pyo. First, and we also have some changes to the members of the presidential offices, and we have appointed Song In-bae, who is the first head of the first Presidential Secretary Room, as the Presidential Secretary for Political Affairs. And Kim Jong-chun has been appointed as the head of the Protocol Office. First, and then I would like to elaborate on these appointments a little bit further. First, Chung Tae-ho, who has been appointed as the Presidential Secretary for Jobs, has a lot of experience in terms of economy, and in the political arena, he is known as one of the person to go to for policies. He also carried out and designed and implemented the policies under the Moon Jae-in administration. And this appointment also reflects President's determination to speed up job creation. And this is the person, Chung Tae, who is the person who has been preparing for the creation of jobs. Yoon Jong-won, who has been appointed newly as the Presidential Secretary for Economy, has a lot of experience not only at home but also abroad in the IMF as well. And he is currently the ambassador to OECD. He has been appointed as the ambassador for 3 years, and he is a very well-renowned economic expert. And he's also an expert in the areas of economy, finance, and commerce. And thus, this appointment is expected to bring out great achievements. And the OECD is carrying out inclusive growth. Therefore, he is believed to be a fit person for the jobs creation pledges under the Moon government. And this appointment also reflects his great determination in the importance of inclusive growth, which goes hand in hand with a people-oriented economy. And he is also very much in line with the pledges laid out by President Moon Jae-in. Lee Yong-sun, who has been appointed as the Presidential Secretary for Civil Society, is one of the Korea's representative activists. And in the early days of Moon Jae-in administration, when we focused on the need to discover and come up with new policy affairs, right now it's time to cooperate and communicate with the civil society. And this person has a lot of experience in diverse arenas, so he has a very good network from seniors to all of the ranges in all of the classes of the society. So this appointment means that the 청와대 will communicate more actively with the civil society. And the newly established policy and planning committee will be focused on income-led growth, and the chair Hong Jang-pyo is one of the scholars who has been studying income-led growth, and he has been appointed by the president with the purpose of leading income-led growth here in Korea. During the past year or so, during the Moon Jae-in administration, we focused on laying the blueprint of our government. And with this new appointment, we will yield better results, and this reflects the president's determination. Do you have any questions? Well, this actually ends our briefing.
Well, there you have it. The presidential office making a major reshuffle within its economic team. Again, the new team given the grave task by the president Moon Jae-in and the people of Korea to draw up some sort of a concrete results in bettering the country's economy that had been showing some eye-watering figures in the recent months. Now, it's also dubbed the people-centered economy by the liberal Moon administration. And that is it for us at the hour, but keep it tuned to Arirang News as we will be back with more of a comprehensive news rundown, including the recent today's reshuffle within the presidential office in our later newscast coming up at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching and goodbye for now.
Literally speaking, the essence of love in a short poem. Grass flower, pretty with a close look, lovely with a long gaze. So are you.
우리가 너무 잘 살고 너무 우리가 빠르게 속도에 빠져 있어서 그래요. 그리고 상대적 비교에 빠져서 그래요. 자기를 살펴보고 자기를 높여주고 하는 마음이 좀 부족하지요. 우리는 다 같이 꽃입니다. 꽃에 맞도록 아름답고 향기롭고 예쁘게 나는 괜찮다. 나는 앞으로 잘 살 것이다. 나는 충분히 사랑받고 이런 생각을 하고 그걸 잊지 마시기 바랍니다.
Like a grass flower, you are more than precious. 아리랑.
Welcome to Live Road Talk Show Beat Cruise. Can you believe it? We're already halfway through 2016. What's been your best memory so far?
I believe it has to be this show and meeting